everybody. My name is Hadar Harris. I am the Executive Director of the Center for Human Rights and Humanitarian Law. I might look a little different than the last time some of you have seen me. There are nods in the back going, yes, yes, yes. So, as a teachable moment, my son and I donated our hair, not to Locks of Love, but actually as part of a campaign called Be Brave and Shave, to support Children's National Hospital here in town, and to enhance and expand the ability for them to do bone marrow transplants for kids with particularly serious diseases. Interestingly, children can be cured of sickle cell disease by a bone marrow transplant. It's very interesting. I had no idea about this. They can be cured, but they have to have a match. And so the clinical trial that is being supported by the money that we raised is actually to expand the opportunities for people to use half matches, not perfect matches, for bone marrow transplants. And so we participated with a group of people raising close to $200,000 at this point. I said to somebody, I don't have a lot of money and I don't have a lot of time, but boy, do I have a lot of hair. So to shave that off. So that's why I look a little bit different than maybe the last time some of you saw me. I want to make a couple of announcements about some upcoming events. This afternoon at 3 o'clock, we have a delegation who is, at this very moment, probably not because they break for lunch, but testifying in front of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights about LGBTI rights in El Salvador. They're going to be coming here to share their testimony and their experiences with our community at 3 o'clock this afternoon in the student lounge. No, in 402. In room 402. So right next door. You could hang out here till 3. It'd be great. And we're pleased to have them coming with the co-sponsorship of the UNRO Clinic, the International Human Rights Law Clinic, and some other folks. Or maybe that's it. I don't know. This Friday at the Case Spiritual Life Center, we're having our next Human Rights Coffee Hour. It's something that's done periodically, organized by our Student Advisory Board and the main campus Student Human Rights Collaboration Committee. And we'll be meeting at the Case Spiritual Life Center, 10:30 in the morning, good coffee and some baked goods to talk about human rights. We do a lot of talking at. We do a lot of listening. We want you to participate in the conversation and to meet other people who are really active and involved in human rights. You guys are laughing. Did I hit it right?
Yes.
Good. So we have a thematic focus this week, which is all about drones and targeted killing. Professor Jeff Bachman from SIS is going to be there to kind of lead that conversation. We would really encourage you all, if you are around, want some coffee, and to meet some other people from across the school interested in human rights, to join us on Friday morning. For all events for next week, of which I'm sure there are many, but I'm just not thinking about it too much right now, you should check the center's website. You should be on the center's listserv. Also, next Tuesday, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, right downtown, right here, the very Senate, is going to be having a hearing regarding ratification of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability. This is something that our center has been involved in, and I will be going together with people from my Global Disability Rights class, some of our Global Disability Rights Fellows who work together with us at the center, and interested students to that hearing, which we understand is going to be right around 2:30 in the afternoon on the Senate side, right off of the Red Line. So anybody who is interested in joining us for that, please let me know, because we'll caravan down there. And if we have the right number of people, maybe we'll take a taxi. So those are the things that come to mind right now. Anything else for next week that I forgot to announce? Any other events for next week?
November 7th, Dr. Watt, the Human Rights Defender.
Stand up and announce it.
Hi, I'm Caitlin. I'm a Dean's Fellow at the Center. November 7th, Thursday, from 3:15 to 4:15, we are doing another Human Rights Defender hour with Dr. Watts, Dr. Viet Watt. He was a prisoner in Vietnam. He was in prison in Vietnam for over 20 years. And they're really informative. These are very moving stories that the last Human Rights Defender, I had never done one of these events before, and it was very, very interesting. So I encourage you all to come, you learn a lot, and it's very personal, very moving stories.
Room 600, 315 on Thursday, November 7th. The story of a real-life human rights defender about why he does the work that he does, why he has done the work that he's done. Those are the things on the agenda. You guys have anything? David, anything specific?
Yeah, nuts and bolts of public interest government career search. If you're looking for an internship for the summer, or you're looking for postgraduate employment, that will be tomorrow at noon. I forget the room number, but it's on the Facebook page for the Office of Public Interest, so you can definitely look there. And a million things I'm forgetting about, I'm sure, but that's the one that's on my mind right now.
Okay, we'll look at today at WCL. Quick poll. Everybody looking at that new device, that new outreach tool? Yes, 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 yes. Good. All right, we want to just assess quickly, because we've got our finger on the pulse of what's going on to see where people are getting their information. That said, we also want to thank you all very much for bearing with us with some confusion around the date of this event. We're pleased to have you here. It's a smaller group than normal, but there was a lot of work put into this event by our Student Advisory Board, the Center Student Advisory Board. We're very pleased to partner with the Office of Public Interest, as well as the Office of Career and Professional Development, to put this annual event on. It's important for you all to hear from your peers about the cool stuff that they did over the summer, how they paid for it, how they found their job. I keep saying how they paid for it, and what they did, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the super. And so we have an awesome panel of people lined up to give you their words of knowledge and their insight. And I want to thank our Student Advisory Board for putting today's event together, and hand it right over. Rahma.
Thank you, Hadar Harris, Executive Director of the Center. Thank you for everyone who made announcements. I will be moderating this event.
I'm going to make sure that
Sorry, I'm soft-spoken, but sometimes I tend to shriek. Thank you, panelists, for participating in this event. The way that the format of this event will go, I'll pose a question. The question will go down the line, and everyone will answer the question, and we'll reserve questions from the audience until the very end. So starting off with Esther, I won't give their bios because that's what they're here to do. If you could briefly describe your summer job, what area of human rights were you involved in? How did you get involved in it?
Esther, if you can speak loudly.
Yes, I will try. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, great.
Fantastic. Good afternoon. My name is Esther Lee. I'm a 2L here. And this past summer, I was in South Korea, and I was doing research on North Korean human rights, or better characterized as the lack thereof. So this summer, I spent time at a global university, at a law school in South Korea, where there's a sort of a public international legal. It's in Korean, so I'm trying to translate. Public international legal clinic of sorts, and I got a chance to work for the director of that clinic, who was the former Director General of the Ministry of Human Rights of South Korea, which actually exists, and I thought that was pretty cool. And I just got to work on international research as it pertains to crafting an argument for how the North Korean government is responsible for acts, certainly against crimes against humanity, but also potentially for genocide. I think there are some scholars who are trying to craft an argument that way. And also, more practically speaking, seeing how NGOs and other non-governmental organizations, intergovernmental organizations, how they can participate in moving this process forward. In fact, today I'm going to be heading out to a Commission of Inquiry hearing that's taking place today and tomorrow on human rights in North Korea. So that's kind of what I did this past summer.
Hi everybody, I'm Caitlin McKenzie. I'm a 2L. This summer I was interning at the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia on Goran Hadjic's defense team. And I was also simultaneously doing this study abroad program in The Hague, which is really good. I would recommend it. So I was learning about international criminal law taking this class, but also learning about it by working on this defense team, which was a really, really nice combination. I would love going to class and learning about something and then coming back and talking with counsel about it and seeing how it applied. I found that really stimulating. So yeah, and so international human rights, international criminal law.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jackie Zamaripa, and I'm a 3L. And I will talk about my 1L summer job. I worked for Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid, and I was approximately 10 minutes away from the Texas-Mexico border. So they had a lot of unique practice areas to the region. And I primarily worked in two practice areas. The first one was migrant farm workers, and the second one was international child abductions. And what was great about this experience is that I was part of the new pilot program at the center called the Local Human Rights Lawyering Project. And that project sought to incorporate human rights framework and the whole dialogue into the local level work, so into our briefs and memos that we submitted to the courts. So yeah, that was mine.
Hi, everybody. My name's Chris Tanzi. I suppose you could call me a 3L plus or a 4L. I don't know if they really have a name for me, but I graduate in December. So given that I've had a few summers, a few opportunities, there are two that I could probably speak on. The first is after my summer after my first year, I traveled to The Hague and did the Hague program while simultaneously working at the International Bar Association's International Criminal Court Monitoring Program. And that was a small branch of the IBA, which is actually fairly large, but based in London, located at the Peace Palace in The Hague, that focuses primarily on defense issues ongoing at the ICC. At the time that I was there, the court was wrapping up its first ever trial. So naturally, given that it was its first sort of run through, there were a lot of fair trial issues to be explored. So that was our primary focus. The second experience I can probably speak on, and this is a sort of a unique scenario, and it's why I'm still here instead of not graduating, is I got an opportunity to work full-time in the fall away from school. And that brings on its own sort of unique bureaucratic process that you have to go through with the school. But I ended up working at the State Department's U.S. mission to the UN, which is, of course, based in New York, UN headquarters, and that took place during the fall of my 3L year. So that required that I be away from the school for a semester. And that's, as I said, it's sort of a unique scenario. Not something to shy away from just because of the process that you have to go through, because the experience was wonderful, and I have no regrets whatsoever. But it's nonetheless unique, and if you find yourself with an opportunity like that, with a tremendous opportunity that's probably too good to pass up, but that involves you travel away from school while the academic year is ongoing, I would encourage you to come find me and track me down, and I can offer us some pretty particular advice, but I'm sure we'll get to that later on.
Hi, everybody. My name's Andrew Crow. I'm a 3L here at WCL, and the summer of my 1L year, sort of extending into the full academic year, my 2L year, I worked as a Dean's Fellow at the Anti-Torture Initiative, which is run out of the center right across the street here. And that project primarily works with the Special Rapporteur on Torture to the UN, which is Professor Juan Mendez, who is a professor here. I highly recommend taking his classes. And that's sort of how I got into it. I took his class of international law, and I liked it, and I went subsequently to the program on international organizations and human rights work that is run in Geneva. So I took courses there over the first part of the summer, and through some of the contacts I made there, I was able to volunteer with Professor Mendez and his support staff here through the UN, and then from there I applied to become a Dean's Fellow with the ATI, and I got it, which was a really great experience. Mostly what I was doing was working on country assessments to follow-up visits that the Special Rapporteur would go to, so it was a lot of treaties, sort of figuring out countries' obligations under various treaties and where they were in their political process to sort of meet those recommendations that the SRT had given them. So it was a really, really rewarding experience, a lot of various components to it. So.
Because of the host of different experiences, I'm curious, I'm sure everyone else is here too, how you managed to find and secure these summer jobs.
So I knew that before even coming to law school that I really wanted to do something that revolved around Korea. And so while during the fall of my 1L year, that's where my mind was, and I knew that if in some way, shape, or form I could actually get myself over to the peninsula, that would be great. And so I didn't really have a topic interest as much as I had a regional interest. And so that's sort of where my mind was, and I wasn't actively looking at anything until one day I was actually at a Bible study, and 3L at Georgetown asked me, like, late October, do you know what you're doing next summer? And I was like, I'm drowning in 1L year, like I'm not even thinking about the summer. And then he told me about a fellowship program that was run through a national Christian organization that funded 1L students to do sort of these internships that were of interest to them. And so that's sort of the funding that I received. But as he was sharing that with me, I connected with the organization, and I kind of told them, hey, I'm really interested in going to Korea. Do you guys have any connections over there? And they were like, in fact, we do. We have a relationship with the university in South Korea. And so at that point, I was thinking, I really want to do North Korea-related, human rights-related type of work. I don't know whether being in a university would necessarily satisfy that interest of mine, but it's free funding to go halfway across the world, so I didn't want to pass that up. And sort of things fell into line beautifully, such that I expressed my interest in North Korea to the people who were organizing my travel, and they got me in touch with the dean of the law school in South Korea, and I got to speak with him, and I just kept pressing on this issue. This is what I'm really interested in. And they made it possible for me to work directly with the professor who was in charge of who was teaching human rights in North Korea as part of the law school curriculum there, and also he was working with several think tanks and organizations that are sort of the premier think tanks in South Korea who are really thinking about this issue, and I got a chance to work with them as well. So it's sort of an organic, unplanned way that I got a chance to go to South Korea, but I don't think that that's an anomaly. So that was my experience.
Like Esther, I came to WCL with in mind that I wanted to do the study abroad program in The Hague. I had a friend at Emory Law School who had done it, and she said it was great. So I knew that I wanted to do that, and working at the ICTY was sort of a dream because I had written my master's thesis on it, and I was fascinated by the conflict and the tribunal that came later. So I knew what I wanted to do, and I emailed the War Crimes Research Office Director, Susanna Sakotu, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but and met with her and said, do you know of any way that I could get there? This is where I want to go. And she put me in contact with 3 students who had previously interned at the ICTY. So I emailed with them, and I was really hoping that they would be like, oh, here's my boss's email. It's all set up, like just show up, which is not what happened. From the people who emailed me back, they sent me to the website where everyone applies. So I drafted a cover letter, which was my first one, took it to Career Services, and they were really helpful in explaining what needed to be changed. Basically, I had written like a narrative of my resume, and I needed to say why my experiences would be helpful to the team that I was applying to. So I sent that in December and followed up. I think I sent like 3 emails making sure they got my cover letter and resume, that they forwarded it on, that I had done everything I needed to do. And then late March, I just got an email that I got the internship. I remember sitting in con law class and getting that email and be like, okay, I'm done paying attention for the day. Like, I finally have an internship. No interview, just got an email that I got it. And so I did the study abroad program because I wanted to, but also because it funded my summer there at the ICTY.
Well, like I said before, I was on the student advisory board last year, and I was working with Lauren Bartlett on the local human rights lawyering project. And at the time that I was working with her, it was still in the research phase and developing the handbook. And we had met with the 2 legal aids that she had selected. So it was Maryland Legal Aid and Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid. we had met them in New York the first time at the UN when we went to go see a Human Rights Committee hearing, and the second time was here in D.C. when they came to the school, and we had lunch with them. And I remember Hadar actually asking if I was interested in working for them, and that's when I approached Pamela Brown, which is in Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid, and asked if they had any internships opening, and she said to do the whole application process. But it helped meeting her in person and talking about my interests and doing the prior research that I had been working with Lauren Bartlett, and that kind of is what got me through the door and down in Texas.
First, I guess experience one at the IBA in The Hague. I think the first step for me was signing up to do the Hague program, so I knew that was in place. And then I sort of figured, well, if I'm there for a month, it's going to be hard for me to come back and participate in an internship here with perhaps a limited amount of time. I know there's sometimes some years there are timing issues, sometimes there aren't, and some employers are more flexible about the number of weeks that you have to work. But I thought it would be an extraordinary opportunity to be able to continue working in The Hague after the program was done and even work simultaneously while the program was ongoing. So I got very proactive, and I think that is probably the best advice that I can give when you're looking at internships outside of the country, is that they don't necessarily advertise. They're not necessarily open about the possibility of having an intern. They're not actively seeking interns. In a lot of situations, it's not like internship programs that we have in this country, where they're advertised and they're annual and they're ongoing and they always have a set amount of spots. And it's sort of part of their process. I had to be proactive, and so I just started with a sort of a Google search. I knew that I wanted to be in the international criminal law field, and so I looked at tribunals. I looked at there's so many programs based in The Hague that focused on ICL, and so I got a list of them, and just going down the line, sending a lot of emails, about whether they would be open to the idea of having an intern from the U.S. come work for them. And by the way, there are conditions. I'll be in school a lot of the time, so you'll have to be you'll have to be lenient, but understand that they complement each other. Eventually, I got a call from Lorraine, who was running the IBA program, and we conducted an interview over the phone. I remember it was the morning after my last final, so I wasn't 100% because the jet lag, the time difference wasn't 100% on point, but it was good enough. And so when I got there, began working simultaneously for the first month while the program was ongoing, and then switched to a full time. The second experience, the State Department, I just applied through the normal channel, which is USA Jobs. It's a website. I don't know if you've had any experience with it yet, but it may be worth going online, just checking it out. I know a lot of government jobs, especially the internships and the entry-level ones, go through USA Jobs. It's a very standardized website across the government. However, when I thought that I was applying, I was applying to jobs based here in Washington, because this is where the State Department is. It never even occurred to me that I would also be considered for a position in New York. But shortly thereafter, I don't know, maybe about a month and a half after, the time frame is usually interesting for the State Department, I got a call from Mark Simonoff, who's the head of the legal section at USUN, saying, I know your application specified Washington, D.C., but how would you like to pack up and come to New York and work for us for a semester here at the UN? And he said, oh, by the way, you have about 12 hours to decide. And then meanwhile, he called my references, one of which was Hadar, who was instrumental in helping.
I should run away. It was not my intention. Go ahead.
But you were, as a reference. And actually, she was the only one.
You called freaking out.
I did call freaking out. Right. I said, oh, by the way, you may be getting a call, you may not. And you were the only one he actually got in touch with. So in any event, State Department, just through the normal USA Jobs website, and then depending on need or where in that massive bureaucracy your resume lands, you'll get a call, and then if it's a position that requires a security clearance, you accept and then start the clearance process, which can take a long time. So if you reach that stage, I would encourage you to fill out that form quickly. And then the investigator comes to your apartment, interviews you for an hour and a half. It's very awkward. And then there's another waiting game. And then as soon as you get your clearance, they expect you to start roughly within 48 hours. So it's a lot of waiting, and then then you're quickly on board.
So, unlike some of the other panelists here and a lot of other people at WCL, I didn't necessarily come here with the intention of solely doing human rights work. I had experience in sort of civil rights stuff in undergraduate work, and I really just took my elective course 1 year, international law, with Professor Mendez, and I really liked it, and I really liked that concept. So I sort of explored my options from there. Ended up, as I said before, doing the summer program in Geneva, which I would really recommend. I think it was the second year they were doing it, so it was still pretty new. And everyone really was really geared to help you out. If you talk to people and you know what you want, and you know that you want to move forward in a certain area, like they will do their best to help you. And I think everyone sort of attested to that with their various contacts and whatever. But so yeah, I was the program there, and that sort of reinforced my initial interest. And I decided that, how could I get involved? And I was able to volunteer, as I said. And at the time, it was really in a limited capacity. I was helping to do some research around drafting Professor Mendez's, Professor Robert Tour's interim report to the UN General Assembly that was going to go on that October. So I was helping them for a few weeks in the summer, putting together research on various things. And through that, I worked closely with Maria Zarda, who runs the Anti-Torture Initiative, who, we had various discussions, and from there on, she suggested that I apply. And I liked the work I was doing, and I sort of wanted to stay in that area. So, yeah, that's how it went from there.
Okay. Just to touch on a few things that everyone mentioned. Aside from Esther, I think everyone had some sort of contact within the school. I mean, they're outer. Oh, sorry. Like I said, I'm soft-spoken. Sorry. Aside from Esther, I think everyone here on the panel had either contacts, connections, some sort of connection to the school that put them in touch with their summer job. So I encourage you all to take advantage of that. While Hadar always mentions this to everyone on the SAB, get over yourselves and get over whatever discomfort you may have in approaching anybody, whether it's Juan Mendez, whether it's Hadar Harris, whether it's David, or any of the other notable faculty at WCL. I got my 1L summer job through CareerLink, so through very traditional channels. But like Esther was saying, she happened to speak to somebody at an event who put her in touch, and that set things in play. So on that, what did you find most surprising about your experiences, and what did you find most challenging?
Yes, just to speak on that point. So it's true, I didn't get my job through anyone here, but I definitely had to ask professors for recommendations. And so definitely don't overlook that aspect of maintaining good relationships, I think, with your professors, because they can be a great resource. So for the summer, a couple of things that I was blown away by. First, being in a different country and working there. I think that's a very different experience than going just to volunteer or going to travel just for leisure. I went with a very different mindset, I think, going in. And I'm fluent in Korean, but this was an opportunity for me to really use it and to stand on my own 2 feet and sort of just be me. So that was very different, but I embraced that opportunity to do so. Another thing that I really enjoyed was not just the legal work that I was doing in the office, but also being able to develop relationships and networking with people there at the clinic, as well as at the various think tanks. And also, there were students there who had defected from North Korea, and I had an opportunity to meet with them on a very regular basis, and as well as do sort of informal interviews. I'll touch very briefly. This student, she she finished all the way through high school in North Korea, and so her professor in South Korea kind of gave her a homework assignment. Can you write down everything that you remember that you learned before you forget it all? Because I think that would be really, really useful for you. It would be helpful for us to understand what people are learning, what people are actually experiencing in the school system in North Korea. And I got a chance to do sort of the questioning so that she can revive her memory, and also for me to get a chance to really learn that. So my experience, I think what was most surprising was that it wasn't just pure, I'm sitting in an office, I'm doing legal work, but it's about the relationships that you're building, and relationships, hopefully, that will continue on even on a professional level, because I do hope to pursue some work related to this in the future. The difficulties, I think, were getting over insecurities. The first thing was, I feel so inadequate, like, what am I doing? I don't know. It was just a humbling experience, I think, to be around people who have been in this profession for a very long time, who have been doing human rights work for a very long time. I was working with the former Director General of the Ministry of Human Rights in South Korea. It was very humbling. But at the same time, I think it was very surprising in how gracious and how willing they were just to be mentors and to help and to, and I think people in general are very receptive. I think if you have this teachable attitude and an open mind. And so that was just really awesome. It was a learning curve for me, but I think it was very rewarding. And the most surprising thing is, I guess, I don't know how many of you in this room would like to use a foreign language in your work over the summer, but being immersed in that culture and being immersed in the country, my language skills just exponentially skyrocketed, and I really am thankful for that opportunity and that experience. So in a nutshell, I think those were some of the surprising and some of the more difficult things, but overall it was a really great experience.
Some of the surprising things I found this summer was how much I enjoyed defense work. I think a lot of us get into this field because we want to prosecute human rights violators and get justice for the victims, and I decided to do the defense work because I knew it was easier to get an internship on that side because everybody wants to do prosecution, but also I think it's a good perspective to have if you do want to do prosecution in the future. So I thought this was a good opportunity, and when I got the internship, I did research on our accused and got terrified of what he was being accused of. And then when I got there and read the indictment and the pretrial brief and talked to counsel and sort of like got into the weeds about the case, I changed my perspective more than I thought. Like when I went, I was like, well, it's important for everyone to get a fair trial, and at a minimum, I mean, that's what we should be working for. But the longer I was there, the more passionate I was about really having to prove what he did. Because I guess you just assume, like, you know that a genocide happened, and you know who the bad guys were. But to prove this in court is a whole nother story, and I really enjoyed the experience on the defense side. Some of the challenging things, one, I don't know if, Chris, you found this too, but it was hard to work and go to class. And when I got done this summer, I was so tired. Like, I hope none of my professors are here, but I didn't do reading for like the first month when I got back because I was exhausted. And taking exams in June, it was like, seriously, again, I just did this. So that was really hard. Rewarding, but it was still difficult. And also, the complexity of the cases was astounding. I mean, I had written about the ICTY and read about it, and I felt like I came in with a good amount of knowledge, but holy cow, that pretrial brief, like, I don't know how anyone would ever gather so much information on one person and how they would document so much, and all of the different countries and militaries and paramilitaries and autonomous regions, and it was really complicated. And some of my tasks would be like reading a witness statement for someone who was going to come in and testify and say, like, what should we object to? What's going to hurt us here? And you have to know about the case and the conflict, and you need knowledge of that to know what will hurt you. And that was really hard. I mean, I think I got the first day to read the indictment. And it's a good thing I did research before, because it was really overwhelming and really complicated, and I was sort of lucky that our guy was pretty segregated into one spot, so we didn't have to deal a lot with the Serbia. But it was hard to come into a case for 3 months, because that's not enough time to learn everything that you need to know, and it takes counsel years, and they work on lots of different ICTY cases, and they get a working understanding after years of experience. So that was hard to come in for 3 months and sort of be able to talk about the case and know what's happening in that short amount of time.
So I'll talk about the challenges first. In working for a legal aid, they had limited resources both in funding and in staff. So it was challenging to sit through case review every week and trying to determine who needed our services the most. So comparing victims of domestic violence or comparing children who needed, our resources. So that was challenging because I came in wide-eyed wanting to help everyone in the area. And especially because it's such a unique area, I kind of felt like Esther, where I was in a different world. Being like 10 minutes away from the border, it was really, you were really immersed in Mexican culture, which is great because I'm Mexican. So it was a new experience and I was able to adapt to that level. But still, going back to being able to help everyone, it was frustrating that we had to turn away clients because of limited resources. And some of the surprising things, though, is the cases that I did work on for international child abductions. It's something that I never really heard about before, but it's when a parent kidnaps the child from the other parent and takes it to another country. So we were working with cases through Mexico and vice versa, so they took them from Mexico to the U.S. And we applied through the Hague Convention, so it was using international and domestic remedies. And working on that particular practice area that was unique to that region kind of sparked my passion in working for children. So, so my internships and coursework ever since that has been related to international law and child and parent abductions. And I don't know if it's too surprising, but working in Texas, it was hard to get the lawyers to adopt a human rights framework and to kind of be receptive to the idea of rooting their legal claims in these fundamental human rights kind of area aspects of law. But it's great that the project's doing it, and some people, like when I left, were more open to incorporating these into their memos and briefs, so that was interesting.
With both positions, this is applicable to both. I think the most surprising thing was the flexibility that they displayed. Specifically making sure that I was enriched as a result of the internship as well. And that's sort of something I wish I had known going into it, because I showed up with this sort of regimented, sort of militaristic, give me work and I'll do it, doesn't matter how long it takes. I'm here to contribute to your operations, fulfill your objectives. And I learned right away that that's not how internships are supposed to go. You're not getting paid. This is an experience that's supposed to be enriching, and it's an experience that's supposed to further your academic achievement. And employers understand that. And so come prepared on the first day with not just the resolve to contribute to operations, because obviously that's important. You do want to make a contribution, but also show up with a list of things that you want to get out of it. Show up prepared to talk about what you're passionate about. And then you'll find that they're extraordinarily flexible in terms of allowing you to focus things that might not as much have that as big of an impact on the objectives of the organization, but which further your own interests. So it's a two-way street, and employers are generally, from what I've experienced and what I've heard others talk about, they're extremely flexible in that regard. I think the most challenging aspect, and I'll have to agree that it was having a course load and working at the same time. And this can arise in a variety of contexts. It's not just if you're studying abroad and working at the same time. This can happen here as well, and a lot of students, as they further their law school career, they take on a full-time job and then try to take classes at night. And it's tough, and it's perhaps more time consuming even than you'd think. And so my suggestion would be honest with yourself about what you can handle, and also be honest with your employer about the fact that you do have this other obligation that is just as important as the internship experience. And in some circumstances, you can sort of sell them as complimentary. I think in our cases, my employer was thrilled that I was simultaneously learning ICL theory, learning the elements of the crimes, listening to distinguished lecturers, people in the ICL community on a daily basis every morning before I showed up to the job. Because that sort of eliminated a lot of the sort of background instruction that she had to provide, but I was getting it independently. So you can sell them as complimentary, and oftentimes there are. Make sure that you can handle both, and that the employer is aware that you're trying to handle both.
So during my time at the ATI, I think that the most challenging and the most rewarding thing were sort of one and the same. And what I was doing for the most part was country assessments and trying to figure out what these countries were doing to fulfill the obligations or the recommendations that were given to them. And that really involves a lot of nitty-gritty research into like what the conditions are in that country. A lot of these countries, especially at that time, were going through huge political changes. I mean, the country I was working on most was Tunisia, and that was part of the Arab Spring, and they had like sort of huge turnarounds in political parties and goals and whatnot. So it was very, very challenging to get information on prisons in Tunisia and what they're doing and what the every day there was a sort of a news event that had to be interpreted and figure out what that has to do with us, and it was really hard to do that. But in the same light, it was very rewarding to be able to know that much about a country that's sort of center stage in this big political transition. So, and moving forward from that, you were sort of the person that they came to if there was a question, because you had spent so much time looking into what organizations were doing in Tunisia, where they're working, who they talk to, who they don't talk to, what the political realities are. So I mean, it was very tough. At the same time, it was very rewarding because I got a lot of questions that no one really knew the answer to, and you had to go and figure it out. That process is.
So to wrap up, can you please briefly describe what you wish you had known before going into your summer job?
So, thought about this question. So I had taken international law with Professor Chuang in the spring before heading over to Korea. I highly recommend that class if you're thinking about your electives. And when I went over to Korea, I thought maybe I would be, in terms of international human rights, applying sort of the statutory provisions in the Rome Statute to the ICC, thinking about the different the treaties that North Korea was a party to, believe it or not. And I was thinking about these things, and I thought these were the substantive things that I would need to carry over there with me. And in hindsight, I think those were definitely important things to know, but I think what I should have done a better job of is to think about how are people in South Korea thinking about North Korea. And I think that kind of speaks to, I guess, like the cultural aspect if you do go abroad over the summer. As Americans, we have a very different perspective, I think. It depends on the issue, I guess, but I think Americans have a different perspective by way of what we're exposed to and the kinds of information, the bent to the information that we get here through the media and so on and so forth. And so I think if I had apprised myself of reading media outlets and reading the news there, I think that would have just helped me understand the political, cultural climate in South Korea, and I don't think it was a huge hindrance, but I definitely think that it would have been rewarding. And I think another thing that I wish I would have known is that I would be learning a whole lot. I think you think about internships and you think about how you'd be working a lot, but it's also, I think many of the panelists have mentioned, like you need to turn your brain on in such a way that you are open to learning a lot and to amassing, and not only learning a lot, but then immediately applying that to your job. And I think that was something that I didn't anticipate. So for example, the director asked me, hey, can you write a memo about like X, Y, and Z? And I was just like, what? Like, I just learned about that yesterday. And so like here I am like trying to dig back, like how do I write a memo, like CREAC, I was just like thinking about these things. And he was like, no, it's just like, I just need to know the information. Just like put it down. I don't care if it's bullet form, just like get it to me, right? And so I wish I would have known that the real world works a little differently than I think what we learn in rhetoric. I mean, that's fine, but I think, yeah, just being ready to adapt to various work, I guess, expectations and also work environments. And I guess lastly, I think I was able to take advantage of being in Korea and, the fun aspects of that. And so that was really rewarding as well. And I think had I known sort of, it's hard to anticipate and estimate sort of your time restrictions, and you are there to do the internship, but I think at the same time, if I had spent a little more time thinking about my weekends and how I can plan those things accordingly, I think it would have been an even better experience. Not that it wasn't, but those are some of the things that I wish I had known before going.
I wish I would have known that it was going to be okay in several aspects. I put a lot of pressure on myself about my first internship, and it was so unnecessary because I know people who got their first choice and they didn't like it, and people who didn't get their first choice and they did. They loved it. So the point is to get your feet wet, to get legal experience in something you think you might be interested in, but if you don't love it, it's okay. That's not the point. The point is to get experience, and I also wish I would have known that I was prepared. As soon as I got my internship, I was immediately terrified that I would show up and not know how to do anything, and they would be like, are you kidding me? Where did you come from? We're never hiring AU students again. But WCL prepared me, and I did fine. I knew what I needed to know. Someone actually asked me if I was on Journal because my citations were so correct, and I was like, you could not pay me to be on Journal. I mean, actually that's not true. I'm a poor law student, so you probably could, but no, I'm not on Journal. But this is just what we're taught. This is drilled into us, and I knew what I needed to know. I had a lot to learn, of course, but I knew the basics. So I wish that I would have just sort of relaxed and known that it was going to be okay. I was going to get whatever I was supposed to get, and I was going to learn a lot either way. And it's not the last legal job. It's just the first. So I wish I would have gone easier on myself about that.
Yeah, I mean, they've kind of touched upon everything I wanted to talk about. One is having an open mind. For me, it was going and exploring a new area that I had never imagined I'd be in. But more importantly, I was going to stress Esther's point about you learn the fundamental and the basics of legal writing, but you really have to tailor who you're writing to, because I had certain attorneys who loved the CREAC format and certain attorneys who didn't and wanted their own style of writing. So just being able to adapt to different attorneys and what their work styles are, and at the same time knowing that CREAC is not going to work for communicating with the client at the same time. So just knowing who your audience is and tailoring your work towards them.
I think those are all excellent points. I would reiterate, just take it easy on yourself. No organization is going to go all in on you. They're not going to base the fate of the organization on the work that you turn in. It's more flexible than that, and they are focused on what you want to get out of it. But also know going into it that you probably know more than you think you know. You're well trained. We have wonderful faculty here. And these experiences working in organizations at home and abroad only reinforce that point. And you may not know it going into it, but you will know that you're highly equipped. And there's a reason that a lot of organizations have WCL students work for them and then start that tradition year after year, making sure that they pull at least some students from WCL. And that's a reflection of the faculty and the instruction that you get as a 1L. So be confident, but also relax, because you're still young, and there's still a lot that you can learn. And no one's gonna, like I said, no one's going to rely on you for these, mission critical projects. It's more about helping you learn and enrich yourself.
Yeah, I hate to echo what everyone else has been saying, but I guess in a different aspect, I think everything they said is true. That you shouldn't put so much pressure on yourself to perform at this high level. And it's really about the experience. And in that same vein, I know that at least for my 1 year, so the second semester became this race to get an internship, and everyone is sort of freaking out about it. And it is important to get experience, but I think it's also important to note that not everyone knows exactly what they want to do, and I think it hurts you to limit yourself in your opportunities, and that especially for your first legal job, it's really just getting a real world experience on anything and being able to apply what you have learned, and you've learned a ton in your first year, to something will help you. So, the best advice I think I wish I had known was that it's not the end all. If you don't get an internship or a position that you were gung ho about going into law school, that if you get something that gives you a lot of experience doing legal work in general, that it will help you. And then moving forward from there, like I said before, people want to help you. People want to give you guidance, and as long as you have an open mind about stuff, I think you'll find a lot of opportunities out there where you thought there might not be one. So.
Thank you. At this point, I'd like to open it up to questions from the audience.
So it seems like pretty much all of you had to be very entrepreneurial as far as procuring your internship position. I'm a part of the Equal Justice Foundation here, so I'm hoping if I get an opportunity like the ones that you've had, I'm able to pay for it with the grant. But were all of you in that? If not, how did you pay for these opportunities, especially going abroad to Korea or The Hague or even to Texas?
Yes,
so I initially did sign up to do Equal Justice, the EJF. I was fortunate enough to have found out about this particular fellowship. It was a faith-based fellowship, so I don't know that it would apply to everyone in this room, but they were able to fund my travels there. And so I guess to expand that so that it's relevant to hopefully everyone in this room is that not to discount some of these more, faith-based organizations or other non-legal organizations that are more than willing to fund students who are, advancing a particular interest or cause. And I think a lot of times we look at, well, what are the legal internship fellowships that I can be looking into? But you'd be surprised to find that there are non-legal sources of funding that you can certainly apply to your internship over the summer. I don't know what those might be off the top of my head, but I think in theory they do exist, and I have heard about them. So I would recommend expanding your search for funding that way as well.
Yeah, I looked into EJF, but I had trouble with the 10 weeks full-time because I was doing classes. So I just got aid for the study abroad program and lived off that, which I think will balance out if I go part-time 1 semester. So that's sort of how I justified it.
Yeah, and I actually turned my job into an externship. So I did 6 credits during the summer and got the funding through the school for taking the course. And I actually get to go part-time my last semester, next semester. So, and there was benefits to the classes too. It was weekly reflective memos, which was good for my 1L summer and my first experience in the legal market kind of. So I'd recommend doing the externship if you're considering that during the summer.
To live in The Hague, I relied on the aid provided through the Hague Study Abroad program. I think independently of the 10-week requirement, there may be some sort of issue getting financial aid and doing EJF at the same time, so you're essentially doubling up. I think there may be a loop. Yeah, I don't think you can do that. There may be a loophole here and there that people may or may not have exploited in the past, but my understanding is that you can't do both. So I opted for the study abroad aid.
So as I mentioned, I did the study abroad program in Geneva, and that was split. It's split between Washington, D.C. and Geneva, so I took 2 classes here and 3 classes there, or 2 classes in each, sorry. And that provided me the ability to get financial aid for the summer, and then I couldn't do EJF because the program ran until July, and that wouldn't have given me enough time. So yeah, I did that, and then I volunteered for like a month, and then the ATI position was a Dean's Fellow position, so it was paid. But that was mostly during the academic year.
Another question. This is more for the 3 and 3+ Ls, but the 2 Ls might have answers also. Did your experience or experiences prove fruitful now when looking for employment after graduation? And like, if so, how? And if not, good luck.
Jackie, do you want to start in that?
Yeah, for me, starting off my 1L summer working for a legal aid was a great talking point for every other externship and internship that I've worked for, because it was really client-centered, and I actually had caseloads that I was working for. And not only that, but going back to the parental-child abduction, it sparked my new career path. So being able to root it back to my experiences at my 1L summer job and having actual clients has been a talking point in every interview that I've had so far.
I can say almost certainly that it has contributed. I think, one, just the willingness to try new things, to travel, to be globally minded, which is something that this school does a wonderful job of fostering. So even if, as in my case, the subject matter has changed, that narrative has stayed consistent throughout. That I love to travel. I love international law. I like legal issues that transcend borders. And so even if you're switching sectors or even doing a complete 180, I think that's a huge part of what WCL does wonderfully, and it's something that I think all employers will recognize.
So just to jump in, Esther has to run downtown to the Korea event, so she's just going to briefly answer it. And then
Yeah, I do want to answer it. So yes, it was actually hugely, I think, beneficial in me getting my job for next year. So, or for the summer rather. When I was in Korea, I realized I wanted to be part of the reunification process. There's a Korean Institute for National Unification that's occurring, and they're like, Esther, if you want to get involved as an American in human rights as it relates to transitional justice, it's really important for you. It's very unique to my situation, obviously, but for you to get some private sector experience. And so while I was in Korea, I was like, oh my gosh, I have not thought about OCI, but boom, here we go. And the employers loved the fact that I had a global perspective, a global mind, also the fact that I wasn't shy about putting myself in a different culture and using language. And I think overall it was, I think the experience abroad, it wasn't so much the substance, but rather I think they were looking at the initiative, the drive, your ability to adapt, like all those intangible sort of things. And I think that really came across well in some of the interviews. And so the employer is also in a different sector, but also very reflective of those same values that I think were part of my experience this summer.
Thank you. Andrew, would you want to answer?
Sure. I sort of changed paths a little bit after my experience at the ATI. I started looking at immigration work, so not too much of a change, but a little bit. So it's hard to say how much my experience at the ATI impacts that directly, but I think, as was said, the developing the narrative to sort of keep it consistent, what you wanted to go for it, and how you got there is important. And I was asked about that, so I actually wrote some more rights on it too.
Substance is less important, I think, when it comes to this.
Elam, do you want to add anything to that?
I mean, I think it helped me, just because I had legal experience and I haven't gotten anything for this summer. I'm interning now at the DOJ, and I think they liked that I was going abroad and doing this kind of unique work. Also, the tribunals are closing, and now that they have the ICC, they arguably there won't be any more ad hoc tribunals. So I think they appreciate the unique experience of that. So if you're interested in tribunal work, I would encourage you to go ahead and look into that and start applying sooner rather than later. So fingers crossed it will help eventually.
Are there any other questions? Oh, sorry.
How did you determine which professors would be your references? Because I think right now they're asking us to begin thinking about applying, and it's prior to exams or getting grades back.
Yeah. Well, for me, think about what interests you. And once you know what you're interested in, that's when you could research what professors are in those fields and can help you out. So for me, I was interested in human rights law, and I started doing research for Lauren, and she was able to guide me that way.
So you're not necessarily looking at your doctrinal professors to be a reference?
You can.
You build the closest rapport, I think, your 1L first semester with your rhetoric professor, and I was fortunate enough to already have that rapport just because we work so closely with them. But that doesn't limit it only to the rhetoric professors. I mean, you should look to your doctrinal professors. I know that my contracts professor, property, they were all more than willing to help out in whatever way that they could. And so stepping in and getting over yourself, as I said earlier, and just meeting with the professors outside of office hours or even in it.
You'll be shocked by how receptive they are. If you just show up and say, I'm interested in your field, or I found your class really interesting, love the way you lectured. Anything that sort of draws you to them. It doesn't have to be much. It doesn't even have to be substantive. But you'll find that regardless, they're extraordinarily receptive, and they're here to help you. Teaching is just one component of what they're hired for. Career development and enriching the students in other ways is also a huge part of it. And all professors, I think, across the board recognize that. So just put yourself out there.
Yeah, all that is true. And also, I guess I would add that if you're worried about your doctrinal classes, I think you get an elective next semester, right? And that would be an opportunity to at least get something interested in at least a little bit.
Yeah.
And if that's the case and you like the class, that would be a good relationship to build as well. But like as you said, the professors here are very helpful. So.
Yeah.
Well, just when you're ready to sum up.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
I'm happy to stick around if anybody has any more questions.
I hope this allayed everyone's fears a little bit. On that, I encourage you all to come to the event later at.
But can I say something just to kind of conclude? Because I'm also mindful of the people who might be watching this later as we download this. Because what I heard was a lot of similarities in some of the experiences, and I think it's important to kind of note that. Here I have some notes. No, it's okay. One is you could be really focused or you could be not focused. You could come in knowing this is exactly what you want to do, or you could be open to opportunities that present themselves that completely transform what you decide to do later. You can have a great experience your first summer. You can have a terrible experience your first summer. My mom always joked about how she really wished I could find the job that I wanted to do instead of having all these internships that showed me all the things I didn't want to do. But learning all the things that I didn't want to do were just as important as those things that I did want to do, and figuring out why I didn't want to do them helped me later on. Talking to resource people. Some of them are professors. Some of them are people who run programs or projects or centers. Some of them are former students or current students who've had the experiences that you're looking to replicate. Using the resources of the people who can review your cover letter. Might be OCPD, might be another professor, might be somebody who worked in the same place who would understand what folks are looking for. That's all super important. Using those contacts, whoever they might be, to be able to get your foot in the door. The experience of volunteering turning into a job, I think, is really important, right? So Andrew talking about, well, I was sort of interested, or Chris, I thought that I would just volunteer somewhere. These internships are not important just to build your resume, but later you might go back and find out that your timing was perfect because there's an opening in that agency that you actually did like, and it could turn into a job. So that's important too. Leveraging the experiences and the internal structures here at the law school. Several of you talked about the HEG program and having gone on that program and some of the other summer programs that we have here. Those are good foots in the door and get you to where you might want to be, and you can leverage that experience in a lot of different ways. So using those things, using interning in the local lawyering project or the ATI project or things that have very practical application, the War Crimes Office, other projects around the school, and leveraging those experiences. Being mindful of the short time frame. You're only there for maybe 10 weeks, maybe 6 weeks, maybe 4 weeks. Thinking about what you want to get out of it as much as what you think that they want to get out of you. Let me give you a little secret. Anybody who works with interns knows that maybe they're going to help you, and maybe you're going to help them a lot more than they help you. But the commitment of having interns is to have that kind of back and forth. And so the more that you can come in having been really thoughtful about what you want to get out of the summer, the better the experience is going to be for you. Because then, if you're in a good place, they're going to really help you to kind of create those goals. Finally, making sure you're doing fun stuff on the weekends, making sure that you really are in the place where you are over the summer, and that you're going off to whatever it might be. I could use some colorful examples, but I'm not going to. Wherever you happen to be in. Finally, we have on the center's website a student guide to human rights at WCL. It is a little bit out of date, but it does provide some opportunities for fellowships and funding. For summer opportunities. It also gives you a pretty comprehensive view of faculty members who are involved or interested in human rights related issues. So that means they might not be teaching classic human rights cases, but they might be involved in criminal justice issues, police brutality, privatization of prisons, and other kinds of things that would be human rights related. And they are accessible. Believe me, everybody wants you to come and meet with them. So get over yourselves, as I guess I'm famous now for saying, and take advantage of all of the great opportunities that are here. Again, I hope that this has been helpful. And David?
Yeah, if you haven't done the mandatory meeting for EJF yet, there's one more chance. It's on November 5th from 10 p.m. to 11 p.m., so there's no excuse. You shouldn't have any conflicts. I think it's in room 100, but that's on the Facebook page of the Office of Public Interest. And then there's also a summer funding page on the website for the Office of Public Interest that you can check out for other funding opportunities.
And whatever is there, because you probably updated it more recently. So that's really good. So we're going to link to that. That's good to know. So lots of resources around. Take advantage of those resources. It's a shame that not more people were able to come today. We're hoping that many people will be able to watch this on download. You can tell your friends, because I think this was a really fantastic discussion. And again, I really want to thank the current Student Advisory Board, former members of the Student Advisory Board, various interns, former editors of the Human Rights Brief, and others who are not affiliated at all with the Center for participating today and in setting up this important conversation. So thank you, guys.